Project Lawful aka Planecrash by Arwayne aka Eliezer Yudkowsky and Lintamande.
Where do the Severite reasoning methods come from? Your disciple refused to say, which I take it means that the story is more complicated than you learning yourself to apply a wizard's mathematics to a way of clear reasoning.
Which disciple was this? And yes, where they come from I'll not speak of.
She didn't give us her name. She seemed young to my eye, perhaps 18 or 20, brown-eyed and brown-haired. She had no visible alignment aura. It's said that when a monk of Aurori did challenge her strength and call her imposter, she plane-shifted him somewhere, casting the spell herself, and didn't bring him back until the next day. Her casting that we saw was wizardry, for she used illusions for illustrations and gave Fox's cunning to help others understand her lessons. That would mark her as at least 7th circle in wizardry, if she could cast an arcane plane shift, which I had not particularly thought to be possible at that age.
She's got nothing. Well, Ione, but Ione's not 7th circle. Even if Nefredi Klapati has a 100x time dilation demiplane, which is not the kind of thing one can rule out, Ione shouldn't be 7th circle yet. Ione with Nefredi Klapati giving her some kind of weird Nefredi Klepati help? Plausible. She conceals her confusion, of course. Under strange enough circumstances, many things are possible, she says mildly. And these are strange times.
Do you not know her? She claimed to have been taught by you personally.
Oh, I know her. I just don't know how she got to 7th circle in the last 5 weeks. I suppose every student ought to outgrow their teacher.
The monk who escorted her here chuckles at that. One of those students, fitting for such a master as you. Anashala now seems slightly less terrified. The disciple didn't claim herself that she was 7th circle, nor anything else about herself, except that she'd been taught by you personally, and that she was teaching only your own doctrine as best she could understand it or predict it.
The other possibility, more likely now that it comes to mind, is that she's up to 5th circle as an oracle, still outrageous, but much less impossible, and Carissa's much less jealous. Then I'll say no more of her either, except that she spoke truly, and it is time for me to go see the site of our event at sunset, I think.
With respectful hesitation, the man who kneeled to her says that Grand Merchant Taravind is nearer to here to visit first. His business is in the 6th circle of Indipata's Lotus, while their gathering place would be in Indipata's 5th circle. 5th circle is as high as you can go without having to answer questions to gate guards before you pass.
Very well, then. They can go to him first.
They set out. There are some introductions spoken. The monk who escorted Seaver here is Ishana, the man who kneeled to her, Parvanch, retired 2nd circle wizard. Parvanch can walk quickly and not talk, or walk slower and talk. He's a wizard, not a monk.
Well, how about she casts fly for him, and then they can go quickly and talk?
They'd still be limited by Ishana ground walking. But Parvanch can tell Ishana where to find the meeting place and meet up with her again at sunset. They fly off. Grand Merchant Taravind is an admirably lawful and evil person. Among his deeds that are known and acknowledged enough to be speakable without incurring his displeasure, he was able to ruin one of his competitors and buy out their debts. Taravind then had that competitor sign over his children as collateral in order to receive a stay on his debt, but despite the stay of debts, the man was ultimately unable to pay. When all his business had fully collapsed, his possessions sold into bankruptcy, and his children sent into slavery, Taravind had kindly paid for an early judgment to show the man that he was now destined for hell, perhaps as a result of selling his children so. It's said that the ruined man went about from house to house among those who'd once had dealings with him, begging them for enough money to perform an atonement, but was injured when guards cast aside this importunate beggar. With a broken ankle, he limped out from circle to circle, seeking a temple in the lowest ring that might offer free-channeled healing, but was slain after he reached the Orison, supposedly by muggers who saw such easy prey. It's said that every year Taravind pays to scry the soul of his former competitor in hell, and that if you can watch and laugh with him about it, he'll favor you in his dealings. Few ask to be part of the viewing party.
In Cheliax, someone like that would often have an incoherence to them. They wouldn't really be acting on their own values, just acting out what they think evil is. But maybe here, a person like that is their true self. I'll look forward to meeting him.
It doesn't take long at all to move through Indipata if you fly as the eagle does. Very soon they'll be landing in front of a mighty place of business, a 2-story building that could house 30 families, faced with gleaming polished stone tiles. Someone has managed to paint or otherwise color the mortar between the tiles so that the mortar looks like it was of gold alloy. The name Carissa Sever will gain them hasty and frightened entrance through a nicely appointed foyer whose walls are hung about with fancy paintings of slaves serving owners in various ways, none outright pornographic. Down corridors of well-kept polished wood. Finally to the antechamber before a very solid-looking door, heavy wood banded with metal. A terrified secretary knocks, and when the door opens a crack, hastily whispers through it. Less than a minute later, a disgruntled-looking muscular woman comes out, blinks astonishment at the crowned beauty, and has a seat in the antechamber. A portly man, clean-shaven about his face and head, perhaps in his late 50s, holds open the office door and gestures to Carissa Sever only to enter. Vudrani dress codes are still hard to read, but his robes are quite colorful and layered, and he wears a +6 splendor headband and assorted magical means of protection.
Message. Tilt her head left if she wants reduel, currently still invisible, following her in.
Tilt. If she gets into some kind of trouble, she'll feel like an idiot. Fifth Circle wizards aren't actually invincible, if you take them by surprise. In she goes.
There's a wizard maintaining an arcane detect magic, standing in one corner of this large windowless private office with a lawful neutral alignment and maybe 3rd or 4th circle by the strength of their aura. Other notable room fixtures include a chandelier set with red, orange, yellow gems and crystals, lit in its center by a bound fire elemental, and the petrified body of a slender woman with a pleading expression, from whose desperately outstretched hand now hangs a cloak and an umbrella. Grand Merchant Taravind has a quick word with the wizard, his eyebrows climbing as a result, and then bows deeply towards the beautiful, crowned, highly magical woman now in his office. He doesn't speak, for it's said that in hell the most dangerous thing speaks first.
I am told that it is to your credit that a cult of mine now exists in Indapata.
Taravind Ayarwain, I should hesitate to claim more than that I doubled or trebled its size compared to what might have been, and much of your core following would have come to you either way, I imagine. May we speak frankly? Urvihat in the corner yonder will say nothing of anything that passes here, and I promise the same if you do.
You have my word that I will not share your words with anyone. If there's something important to be told to Keltham or anyone else, Redul will say it. We're all lawful evil here. That's fair play.
I'll ask plainly then, how much of all this is real?
The pact with Asmodeus is real. Neither of us lose anything if it goes unfulfilled, and I suspect it serves Asmodeus for it to be known, whether I make any progress towards it or not. It will delight devils to notify people, I think, that they failed to meet the conditions that'd make them Carissa Severs, even if such conditions are real and I a true power in hell. The cult is useful to me because I intend to ascend. I might or might not conquer some planets first. We'll see how various plans work out.
By compact, they need only serve yourself and hell in life and call your name in life and death, do they not? So your disciple said. And what do you intend to make of any souls that come to you in hell?
Underlying the lessons circulating as mine, there is theory related to devil-making. I understand why Asmodeus made them without creativity, without perfectionism, without all-surpassing ambition. But I don't like what it made hell into. I don't like that so many with evil in their heart try to suppress it all their lives lest they end up there. I see his aim, and I can achieve it while preserving more of what makes a mortal lawful evil and deserving of hell in the first place.
I harbor some resentment towards the current Prince of Hell, I do admit. Being a merchant in the slave trade means you cannot buy your way into Axis, as do so many adventuring villains whose activities are far less useful and economically important than mine own. Each slave I trade is accounted more evil than my entire profit donated to charity would be good. I would consider it reasonable to go to hell if hell would only treat me the way I treat my slaves. They aren't punished if they don't misbehave. I train them in ways that make them more profitable. I feed them plainly, but enough that they can put on muscle if not fat. I do my best to sort them into occupations suited to them, as is profitable and I'd say in most cases kind. I don't sell girls to brothels until they're of age or underage boys either. Many succeed in purchasing back their freedom or winning it as favor from a kindly master. If they lived an eternity, I imagine they would all be free in time. I only inflict finite discomfort on slaves who pass through my hands. I refuse to accept that endless extreme torture is reasonable justice for that. Even good, by all accounts, agrees with this. I've summoned a contract devil to see if I could negotiate a more reasonable fate, but the degree of servitude they wanted to Asmodeus and hell in exchange was frankly unacceptable to me. I am simply not that fearful of taking a plane shift to Abaddon at the end of my life. We may be able to reach some amicable arrangement, Master Sevar. Indeed, we could almost have been made for each other, I'd hope, but I'd have a great deal more specificity of you first, on how you'd treat my soul if it came to you in hell.
It's interesting. That's not the story people told me when they were telling me how lawful evil you are. But letting aside who deserves what, which always seemed too good of a question to be interesting to me, yes. People should treat their slaves in the fashion that maximizes their output and their motivation, in a way that gives them the opportunity to improve themselves and become more valuable and the incentive to do so. You can shape people with torture, and sometimes you certainly should, but if people will get tortured no matter what they do worse. It is my intent to make every soul I own better and more valuable, to give them the means and the reason to grow, to let them rise by their own strength. But I don't, in fact, know your strength, so I'll make no promises about how far it'll carry you. Those who served me in life, and are presently dead, live in comfort and pleasure in hell at the moment, even though it took some doing. That I swear. I'm not going to turn them into shattered blobs of flesh later, unless they really make a point of giving me no other way to make use of them at all. That I swear also.
Those who served you now live in comfort in hell. This I hadn't heard.
They're in Ericura's gardens until I can go and get them. What my acolytes say of me is mostly true, but it's little of the truth.
And what would it take to earn the same treatment myself?
They did some things of great value to me. One of them is owed at least a third of the credit for the fall in spell silver prices, by keeping Keltham engaged for at least that long. There is still much of value that can be done for me, but not nearly as easily. On my current shopping list, for instance, are wishes, and a headband only slightly inferior to mine for a useful research assistant, and a conversation with someone who has traveled the great beyond to other worlds, and a wish wording or set of wish wordings that'd close the world wound, and some skilled high-level adventurers who could help me cleanly handle a succession dispute in my home country of Cheliax. It might be that my favor can be bought with just the cult in Indapata, especially if anything comes of it. But a wise person wants more surety than that of attaining anything of particular importance to them.
Those asks are considerably advanced beyond the arenas I do fight in, Master Sevar. What treatment can I earn in hell from only backing your cult in Indapata?
If I succeed, you won't suffer except in the course of normal punishments for the sort of misconduct usefully corrected with pain, and will have the chance to retain who you are and try your own hand at shaping slaves in hell. If your cult here impresses me greatly, I'll see about buying you protection in hell.
What is the greatest intensity, greatest duration, greatest frequency of punishment that'd be applied to me at any time during my eternity in hell? Master Sevar, it's said that you were an Irorite priest, albeit a lawful evil one, before you turned to this course. I know a merchant's ways might seem disdainful for you, but protection without specificity is no protection at all, in contracts.
I don't condemn intelligence. There's rather too little of it anyway. Should this be in my power, I will do to you nothing that you have not done to another, for no longer than you did it, at no less provocation. Does that suffice?
I'd have it be specific that it was nothing I knew had been done to any slave that I legally owned, during the time that I legally owned them. And that I'm entitled to skip burning in Avernus before coming to your hands. Even the devil I tried to negotiate with offered me that much.
Sure, I won't do anything you know has not been done to any slave that you legally owned while you legally owned them, and I won't sell you except under circumstances where you'd have sold someone, and I'll exercise as much screening of buyers as you did. It amuses me, Master Taravand, for your eternal fate to be substantially bounded by how much the story you tell about yourself is true. I have no hesitations about slavery, but some annoyance at delusion.
I sold none to apprentice torturers, and I was offended to be asked. I'd have sold none of mine to devils at any price I was ever offered. Can we have the explicit understanding, then, that I'm not to be sold to any devil, or at least none who doesn't agree to abide by all these same rules?
Yes, I'll agree to that.
And this is to be mine in exchange for supporting your cult in Indapata?
I'll compare it to the cults in other cities with less cooperative sponsors. If I'm convinced, evaluated fairly, you've done me a substantial service, and I do become a power in hell with the right to all those souls that call my name and do me and hell more service than disservice, and you are among them, then you'll be treated in accordance with the terms I just described and sold on only to anyone who agrees to them.
He smiles slightly. I've spent about 100 gold pieces a week on your cult in one way or another, in addition to lending it the weight of my name and speaking against a proposed ban of it by the city government. I have no weight at imperial levels, but have some spoons to stir Indapata's pot. I hardly think it fair that my fate be judged relative to what sponsors in other cities have done, perhaps those who fear Abaddon more than I. If I support your cult, as I've already been doing, is that enough to win that much grace from you?
I have a feeling you could afford to double it.
So I could, though it's not clear how your cult could usefully spend the extra money. I've spent 100 gold pieces per week because they haven't rented any more speaking places, or required more protection about their business, or found more criers to hire than that. How about you simply don't sell me to anyone who hasn't agreed to abide by the terms of the compact, including that term, and I'll offer up to 200 gold per week support, if whoever seems to be your cult's current leader in Indapata has requests as productive, fairly judged by myself, as those they've made already, for at least 1 year, and at most 10 years, or until I die or have myself petrified for a time, whichever comes first.
12 years, and you can't petrify yourself inside 4. This doesn't matter at all, but she can't tip her hand on being indifferent to anything that doesn't happen in the next 2 months. And averaging 200 a week, if there are requests as productive as those they've made already, but exceeding that sometimes, if, for instance, there's a spike in demand whenever I pass through town.
I expect that'll be acceptable to me. I'll wish to write a formal compact and think on its terms before I quite sign myself over. How am I to know if I've done hell more service than disservice? That's an element of the compact you were to seek with Asmodeus, according to what your disciple said.
With that, I can make you no guarantees, except that hell likes it when you damn people, and the rumor mill at least has it you enjoy that yourself.
He smiles more widely at that. I've never hired a malediction and would never. They damned themselves, and if any element of that was unfair, it's Pharasma who made those rules, not myself. But since they went to hell, I might as well profit in reputation from having their fates scried and made known, and acting as if it were all my doing. I haven't done hell any disservice that I know of. Can I simply send gifts to Cheliax's government for that purpose? You mentioned a succession dispute in Cheliax. Is there anything I should know to avoid doing you a disservice there?
She smiles blandly. Maybe send your gifts in a month once things have settled down.
He smiles back equally blandly. How long do you stay with us in Indapata? I'd like some time to think over contract wordings and perhaps consult someone more knowledgeable in infernal compacts.
I'd only planned to spend the evening, this trip, and to return perhaps monthly if events don't change that. I have cults in many cities, and things keeping me busy at home besides. I'd want the increase in spending to start immediately, to take advantage of any opportunities my presence presents. I can wait a month to ink the deal if you can.
He hesitates slightly and then nods to this. With the understanding that the timed terms begin running now, yes. Is there aught else I can do for you?
Not especially. Pleasure doing business. She pauses on the coat rack as she stands. Posed with dominate person or natural?
It's something of a personality test, that petrified woman. Some joke uncomfortably, some compliment him. Relatively few notice the improbability of petrifying somebody at just the right moment to produce an ideal cloak holder. I told her to do it, and she did. It turns out that even if you're not a fifth circle wizard, you can get a long way in life on just threats.
I thought so. Hell keep you, Master Taravand.
May you succeed in all your goals, Master Sivar.
Well, she's not profoundly satisfied with that or anything, but she is pretty sure if it leaks, no one will infer that Carissa Savar expects the world to end in a month, for better or for worse, nor that hell, if she ever rules in it, is going to be very different.
He'll escort her from his place of business personally. Being seen in Carissa Sever's amicable company can only help his status in Indapata. Those who feared him before will be in terror of him now.
She is happy to be a terrifying accessory to this guy, who does seem like the kind of person Asmodeus wants, including his desperate trying to avoid becoming Asmodeus's.
Parvunch is still waiting for her in the foyer when she comes there, of course, to escort her to the Fifth Circle and the Sunset's meeting place.
She's looking forward to it.
He can't fly anymore, though. Does she want to do that again, or walk to the Fifth Ring location?
She can fly him again, why not?
Then they'll be able to approach the meeting place very quickly. Parvunch should probably be able to think of a million better questions, but the only one coming to his mind is whether Sever got along amicably with Grand Merchant Taravind. They're both rather important people to Severism in Indapata. He'll ask that one.
We did. It's interesting to meet lawful evil people who aren't Chelish. They relate to it very differently.
How so? He's still nervous about exactly how well they got along.
I don't have it all figured out yet. I haven't actually spoken to all that many people outside Cheliax. Is he useful to you?
He is the most powerful person associated with Sevarism in Indapata. People would respect us less if we did not have his backing. If they respected us less, fewer promising folk would come to us.
Well, it is my hope that you'll grow in prominence, and I am delighted to have been introduced to him.
Parvunch begins to slow and descends towards what was clearly a medium-nice inn at some point in the past, and it's been kept up acceptably. There's roses about the grounds, and an old signboard proclaims this the Rose Inn. The gathering of those with promise will be called here for sunset, if that's agreeable to you. I hope I may say honestly to my superior it will probably not be good for your cause here if you then fail to appear.
It would take some very surprising event indeed to prevent me from keeping my appointment, and hopefully if that happens I can at least send an acolyte in my place. I think it very likely that I'll be there.
Should I warn them to expect a vision of hell on your arrival? I do think that those who fled were not necessarily being cowardly. In doing that, there is something to be said about common sense. There.
Yeah. It would be a shame to build a cult with no common sense. I'll do it, but I'll make sure first that they have no reason to think their physical safety is in question, and that I am not going to grab and maledict anyone as a demonstration.
So you will not be doing it on arrival then, and I need not warn them about that?
Correct.
Are there any services, objects, codes of dress, any else that you'd have of us for your appearance here? This will be a great day for Severism in Vudra, I think.
If there is anyone among my following here who would sell their soul, and if that's legal here, I would give them a very good price for it tonight. Beyond that, dress well. It's not an ascetic faith. I plan to make the world much richer, and hell even richer than that.
Buy souls? Can you do that?
I know some devils, and I can arrange for my own to be held as mine. I do not know if it is legal in Indapata. Even if it is, they might change their mind after someone does it publicly rather than in dire secrecy. I think there are lots of people who'd sell their souls, if they had time to think about it and if hell was a better place.
I don't even know if that's legal and am concerned that our Irorian sponsor will not be happy about it. You could ask her, I suppose. I would disobey city authorities for you, Master, but would wish not to do so openly without good reason.
It is in our interests to knowably obey local authorities where they are reasonable. Mine is a somewhat threatening faith, and we don't want to invite crackdowns on it. I think I could assuage the doubts of our sponsor, were this legal and were there someone who desired it, but it would need to be someone whose way walks this path, as mine did.
There's no harm in asking, Master, but I think it unlikely she will assent. Indapata is a very lawful place by comparison to other places of which I've heard tell, but it is not so lawful that something not being illegal is enough to mean that you or she can get away with doing that openly. Were you to order word spread among us in private and meet sellers quietly afterward? I think we could get away with that if it were legal.
Spread word, then, quietly, and I'll make arrangements for afterwards, just as quietly. If there's someone who wants a loved one returned from the dead, or 10,000 gold, or to wear my crown and see if it sets them on the path to enlightenment, and to be generously equipped for where that path takes them afterwards. I am very rich, and there are some benefits in the pursuit of this path for having chosen it so you can no longer dally about it.
Your will, Master.
Go then, she says, and smiles very beautifully and very terrifyingly, and turns around to look for Riedel.
He'll appear once this person is gone. You know, I once considered starting my own cult. Today I am once again confirmed in my belief that, no matter how clever the magical tattoo I had invented to enforce loyalty, refraining from doing that was absolutely the right decision.
Oh, I don't see why not. This is fun. Except she does see it. It's fun if you like them, if you want to spend your time trying to comprehend them, or if you enjoy their suffering. Otherwise, it's just, Objectively speaking, getting people to sell their souls on the basis of a compact you're probably not going to fulfill is an awful thing to do, and no one could reasonably believe Carissa's going to be able to fulfill it. In a sense, any person she signs up is making a mistake. It so happens that things are going to change very soon in objective time, and it's reasonably likely that either they'll be annihilated or that hell will be much improved. But still, it's an awful thing to talk someone into. The reason Carissa is doing it is precisely that it's an awful thing to talk someone into. Word will speed through Chellish spy networks or hellish reporting, and they'll know, that Carissa Savar is not lawful neutral, is not planning to sell them out, because no lawful neutral person would talk people into hell on the promise of making it gentler for them and then abandon them to it. She's pretty sure Axis wouldn't let you in, even if Pharasma was distracted by some shiny orphans you fostered or something. And so it'll be the proof she needs that she is still serving Asmodeus, and hopefully he'll keep that in mind on some level when he decides whether the world is worth fighting for. And the soul sold? In the world where Keltham fails ignominiously and is crushed like a bug in hell and the world stay the same? Well, Carissa will probably be crushed too in that world, so she guesses they'll just go to hell then. That anguish, the anguish she felt at having Oligario killed, the knowledge you could protect someone and they prayed you would and you decided to do something else instead, is almost definitely not why Redouel didn't want to start a cult. Probably he had some entirely different problem. Magical obedience tattoos? She asks, taking his arm for the next teleport.
A very clever solution in want of a problem. I can show you the spell diagrams if we've the leisure, but you won't be able to do them until you reach 7th Circle. Where to next? Isfahel of Kelesh, Kasai of Minkai, Quantium of Nex, Opera of Taldor, Absalom.
Absalom's the trickiest, and I want to do it last, once I've worked out all the bugs. Let's do Isfahel next.
To Isfahel they teleport then.
Isfahel, Kelesh, Earwain. Carissa Seaver's hell-worshipping sect seems to be illegal in Kelesh, just like the actual Church of Asmodeus for some odd reason. Highly illegal. It's like not a smart question for foreigners to wander in and ask about illegal. This particular squad of city guards was not much of a match for Carissa Savar, let alone Redouel, and they could definitely disguise themselves if they wanted and continue, but there's a question of how to actually locate her worshippers in Kelesh.
Oh, too bad. She'll just stone-shape her compact into the nearest wall and go then.
It doesn't even last 24 hours, but several enterprising people copy it down and sell the text for a few coppers to local news sheets, which print it verbatim so that everybody can see the dangerous nonsense that Severists believe. So now all of the actual Severists in Isfahel know the compact terms, if that was the goal. And shortly after, most of her followers in all Kelesh. They're definitely on board with conquering and ruling at least the Kelesh part of Galarion, if someone would lend them the raw military power for that. Opera Iarwain. Taldor, a nation in some ways very nearly identical with its enormous capital city of Opara, is proverbial for its complexity. Anybody who knew Taldor could tell you that Taldor would never ban Severism, because ban Severism fits into 2 words and is therefore far too simple to be anything that Taldor's government would or even could do in real life.
Modavian Earwain felt it wiser to de-emphasize the entire, all this talk of the mathematics of thinking. It's strange, unaccustomed. The man speaking, name of Modavian, looks thin almost to the point of wasting. This lack of bulk is not much ameliorated by his enormous puffy beard and hair. He seems not much intimidated by Carissa Savar, the supposed object of admiration of the fan club that he claims to lead. Possibly because he's confident that she lacks much actual pull around here. Possibly because he's trying too hard not to act scared. Possibly because she's a beautiful young woman. It's hard to tell with people like him.
I see. What have you been emphasizing instead?
Worship of you personally. Proclamation of your inevitable deityhood and superiority to all other mortals. That's a recognized aspect of religious sects, and doesn't make people feel like they're in a cult.
Can't have people feeling like they're in a cult? What? Are these people hoping to accomplish by worshipping me?
We currently try to downplay talk of accomplishing things, so as more clearly distinguish ourselves from certain Severist splinter groups who've taken that as a rallying cry, like the effective Asmodeans. To be clear, we try to cultivate an appearance of being allied with the more politically palatable offshoots, but at the same time, we need to clearly distinguish ourselves from them so as to retain our own identity in the eyes of the public.
Okay, so in public messaging, you're not talking too much about accomplishing things. But privately, what are you trying to accomplish?
Maneuvering our sect into a position of greater political influence in opera? He says in the tones of somebody confused about what other life goals anybody could possibly have.
And is that what the splinter cults are trying to achieve too?
No, they're much more politically naive. To give you some idea of how naive they are, some of them have allied themselves with the Greens, the colour currently in power, even though everybody with any sense knows that the colour not in power tends to be more generous towards its supporters. Their cozying up to the Greens made it substantially more difficult for sensible people like myself to bribe some Green senators to denounce you as a threat to Taldo's sovereignty, which is how I was able to get the Blue faction to endorse you as probably a better ruler than Prince Stavian, which in turn ensures that Prince Stavian can't suppress Severism without looking weak and fearful of us and risking blue riots. The post-Severists are even more firmly blue, though they would generally be considered an enemy of Severism in the eyes of everybody except the general public, which can't tell the difference. But a serious and ongoing problem is that the so-called this part of Taldor, which split off from post-Severism, contains multiple openly green luminaries. I am genuinely concerned that Severism may start to be seen as apolitical, which is to say without political defenders or allies, and the so-called mathematical Severists have not been helping by going around saying that Severism should be apolitical. Oh, they don't use those words, but it's what they mean.
Tell me more about the mathematical Severists.
Well, they're practically wizards is the problem. Or worse, wizard wannabes, rather than actual wizards who at least have wealth and influence to make up for the immense face-punchability of having wealth and influence while being neither nobles nor gladiators. They're openly supported by and allied with a sixth circle wizard who lives near but not in the capital and doesn't have any colour allegiance, which is nearly the worst look imaginable for Severism. Their political doctrine, insofar as they even have one, is that the reds, whites, greens and blues are all— I can't even remember how they put it, because my mind is wincing away from it too hard. That all of the colour factions are ultimately just chariot racing fans. They're extremely cower rather than strut, if you take my meaning. If I could have them all killed tomorrow, I absolutely would.
I'll see what I can do, she says dryly. I was here to ensure that my sect leaders possessed the full text of my compact with Asmodeus, and to buy souls if there are sellers. But it seems like the game you are playing is too sophisticated for the compact with Asmodeus, or hell itself, to feature much in it.
We've been downplaying most talk about hell and Asmodeus, for obvious political reasons. But you making a clear statement that I am the leader of your sect here, and other groups should fall in line behind me, seems like it could bring at least the mathematical Severists into line. And while the effective Asmodeans deny your divinity, I think they do respect you a good deal. At least some of them, anyways.
I will go talk to these other sects and see what I think of them. What, are all of the sects?
They're not sects, they're splinter groups. Ahem. The effective Asmodeans are by far the largest, most popular, best-funded offshoot of ours, though most of them would deny that they're an offshoot of Severism, and, to be fair, may have no idea that they are. Their doctrine is, do the most evil, and by that they mean use Aurasight on groups being paid or supported in doing evil things, in order to measure the number of alignment shifts from good to neutral or neutral to evil, and use that to determine the most cost-effective ways of producing alignment shift per gold piece. Though they tend to restrict their investigations to legal and politically popular activities, of course. At present, their most effective intervention has been determined to be supporting women in inducing abortions, for instance by providing them with safe hospices and medical care afterwards, as is very popular with blues, unpopular with greens, and impossible to openly oppose without angering the Church of Callistria and getting mysteriously stung to death by wasp swarms.
And why are they trying to do the most evil? As a service to Asmodeus?
It's more that they advertise themselves as, if somebody else is trying to sponsor the doing of evil, because they want to go to Axis instead of heaven, believe themselves to be in need of that, or want to make a visible point about needing it, they can do it by donating to the effective Asmodeans and get a lot of evil done per gold piece, in a legal and politically popular way that makes you look good to your friends. I mean, it's obviously not actually the most service you can to do Asmodeus. He's not going to conquer Galarian that way. Except insofar as activities like that make Asmodeanism look more palatable. A lot of them basically say so. They get a significant amount of support from Asmodeus's church. Obviously not because Asmodeus's church doesn't have any better way of doing evil, but because it helps make evil look good in Taldor.
But why are they doing that if it's not to serve Asmodeus?
They're serving Asmodeus in a legal, politically popular way that leaves a lot of room for anybody involved to declare afterwards they were really just trying to help young women in trouble. If the whole Severism thing doesn't work out, and in fact doesn't require them to be openly Severite at all.
I see. What else?
The second largest splinter group is post-Severists, whose primary doctrines are that you're not a god yet, you haven't conquered even a single country, and Abigail Thrune is prettier than you. They also say that your reasoning methods can't reduce all of life to calculation. You can't make real decisions just by assigning numbers to everything, without using any intuition, that we shouldn't suppress all of our emotions and replace them with pure cold numbers, and that the whole thing isn't original to you and was mostly copied off Keltham.
And those are, doctrinal disputes they have with the other Severites?
No Orthodox Severites would agree with all of those claims, but the general public doesn't know that, and neither do most post-Severites, so it's a very effective message for recruiting more post-Severites. A lot of them also have tragic stories about how they were raised in your sect as children, and ended up permanently stunted by all of the messaging about suppressing your emotions with numbers, or how they were fooled into giving away all of their gold to effective Asmodeans, or traumatized by believing that everybody suffering in hell was suffering, because they couldn't manage to conquer a single country for you.
How old is my sect in Taldor?
About a month according to Severite orthodoxy, but according to the post-Severites, it's been hidden inside our country for the last decade. The current outer face of Orthodox Severism, if they acknowledge its existence at all, is a smokescreen put up by your true core followers who believe in replacing all of their emotions with numbers.
So the people who claimed they were raised by Severites and are so weak they ended up emotionally broken by it are making that up? Why would anyone make that up? No one would ever associate with someone who was openly that pathetic. If that's the first move of a ploy, the second move pretty much has to be dying in a ditch of tuberculosis.
It's the redemption story that's standard for their sect. They're claiming that they were that pathetic and are now no longer that pathetic, having been saved by the light of post-Severism. Severism is just an extremely popular thing to be post, if you see what I'm saying. Not actual Severism, the Severism that's been underground in this country for a decade, backed by multiple wealthy wizards, teaching people to replace their emotions with numbers. To be clear, this situation is not my fault. It's one I inherited from my predecessor. I've been making steady headway on it since then.
Carissa is starting to understand why you might need torture to fix people sometimes. Who else?
I suppose I'd be remiss in not listing this part of Taldor, since it contains many influential figures in Aperian Severism. But they don't have any doctrines, which is why they just call themselves this part of Taldor. That is, they're people who find themselves drawn to something about the atmosphere of Severism, effective Asmodeanism, and post-Severism. But that thing isn't any of the ideas or political positions, and they aren't willing to affiliate themselves with those, but they do want to go to the same gatherings as us on a regular basis.
Do they want to go to hell?
You'd have to ask them individually, because they wouldn't acknowledge any collective position on the topic. If all of them gave the same answer individually, and they found that out, some of them would probably change theirs to avoid having a collective position.
I see. And that's everybody?
The Iomedan Severists want to back you in taking over at least one country that lawful evil people could go to live in, so that if they died, they'd get better treatment in hell, especially women who had to expose their babies and so on. They're hoping that's much more scalable than current solutions. The Iomedan Severists want as few people as possible to go to hell, but if they have to go to hell, they should go to Savar. Most of them think it probably can't work, but it'd be so important if it was true that they think it has to be tried. They're led by Kalpus, a supposedly reformed ex-mugger. Their core doctrine obviously contradicts our own, but at the same time we try to look as close to them as possible, because that muddies the political waters for anybody trying to paint Severists as Asmodean or evil.
Have they picked a country they agree I can have?
Debating which territory is most of what they do during their gatherings, as I understand it.
I see.
And finally, the mathematical Severists claim to be the real Severism, and go around openly affiliating with wizards, talking about mathematical methods and other such things that offend the public. Fundamentally, I'd say that it's Severism for people who have no political awareness, and no interest in acquiring political awareness, and want to feel superior about their own lack of splendor.
And their leader you mentioned is some wizard?
Their primary financial backer is Kershaw, a Sixth Circle wizard who built himself a tower a mile outside of Apara, and who's now famous for replying, when somebody asked him why not somewhere more fashionable, "The land was cheaper there and I can teleport." To give you some idea of what sort of man we're talking about here.
How pragmatic. I wonder what he's in it for.
Not his place in hell, I expect. He bought his way to lawful neutral, and didn't even bother to hide the donations as most people in his position would.
Well, you never know. Maybe Pharasma will revoke that exemption and he'll end up in hell and wants to hedge his bets.
I rather think if that was the case, he'd be backing us. What he's trying to accomplish by backing the mathematical Severists, I have no idea. It can't be to make wizards look better, because the fact of wizards backing anybody will make them look bad, and then wizards can't gain prestige from backing them.
Truly a dilemma for wizards.
A blank look is replaced by sudden alarm, as though of realizing who he's talking to. Oh, nobody thinks of you as a wizard except for post-Severists. You're a nascent goddess, and anyways, real wizards don't look as good as you do.
Would I be right in imagining that in Taldor, mostly only wizards go to the World Wound, as it's so far away?
The World Wound? I'm not particularly aware of what goes on there. I know we have some treaty obligations there, but so far as I know, those are not relevant to real conditions on the ground.
Carissa is going to chalk that up as more evidence for her theory that people can only really think if demons are trying to eat them. I see. Thank you. I will speak to the other sects and decide who, if anyone, to announce that I back. The most decisive consideration will probably be who is committed to going to hell.
I do believe that I am the only leader in question who currently actually pings alignment detection and registers as lawful evil. The splinter groups, if they ping detection at all, tend lawful neutral, or in the case of the Iomedans, lawful good. The mathematical Severists in particular openly reject that being currently evil should be a condition for high rank in a Severist organization because of some nonsensical reasoning about incentives. Of course, the post-Severists and this part of Taldor, as don't even pretend to owe you allegiance, would presumably lean chaotic.
That seems silly of them and is certainly a compelling point in your favor. I will see if I can get them straightened out.
He'll wait until this thing is out of hearing range and then ask, "Would you like to pay me to kill him?"
Bit hasty, isn't it? Maybe everyone else is even worse.
Well, in that case, would you like to pay me not to kill him? It would be somewhat of a default action for me here.
No murdering my loyalists for personal reasons. We're on an important mission here. I assure you that if all goes well and he comes to me in hell, I will very patiently rewrite his entire personality.
I had been thinking that I did not quite see the point of any of this, and now, suddenly, I am thinking of people whom I would pay to maledict, if by doing so I could send them to you and pay you to rewrite their personalities. Painfully.
Oh, there's an audience I'm not yet serving. People who would maledict their enemies if only hell took more specific service requests. We should start some rumors about that, though probably not yet. If anyone jumps the gun, I won't get their offering. Maybe when we make rounds again in a couple of weeks. Where's this wizard who runs the maybe not hopeless Severite cult?
This situation, as is so often the case in Taldor, is only going to look even more and more complicated as Carissa Seaver investigates it further. Possibly a lot of the problem here is that Severism in Taldor does not have a clear agenda that lines up with anybody's personal incentives. In Vudra, at least, there was something of a map onto lawful evil eroism, and there being a place for those people to go that wasn't Asmodean hell, and a daily activity of self-refinement that the monks there could readily recognize. In Taldor, the closest thing to a clear agenda that makes sense in terms of anybody's direct goals is Iomedan Severism, which doesn't want anybody in hell in the first place, and therefore would like Carissa Sevar to conquer a country as soon as possible. What does Carissa Sevar think her followers in Taldor are supposed to do? People will ask her this question with the air of somebody who never thinks to question, for a fraction of a second, that Carissa Seaver must have built this whole cult for herself on purpose and had some purpose in mind for it.
Ha 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 ha, yes, absolutely, that's what happened. Carissa Sevar wants her cult in Taldor to sell her their souls. Can she get away with that, though, or is it pushing them too far?
It would help if there was some account of why, a larger plan into which this fits, a reason why this would be in anybody's self-interest, or other interest, if good. People in opera are inclined to ask, "What's in it for me?" about as often as people do in Cheliax, but without the sense that defying orders will get them immediately lit on fire.
She's going to ascend in. Don't tell anyone, she tells them, knowing they'll immediately tell everyone. Between 4 months and a year, depending how long it takes her to make some arrangements that'll be easier to make as a human than as a god. She expects that at that time, her cult will swell enormously as people realize it was real all along. As a new god, she'll be limited, but those who she owns she'll be able to easily work through, grant cleric levels, send visions, and command in her glorious conquest.
The people who seem willing to strongly believe this for purposes of shouting about it will seem to sort of suddenly back off when it comes to selling their souls to hell, on the basis of the promise that Carissa Seaver will be there to take care of them afterwards. One gets the impression that a lot of Severists would sell their souls to her in exchange for large amounts of money, if they could be certain that Carissa Sever would be there to receive them and hammer them stronger. Not all of her cult, not even half of her cult, but a quarter of it maybe, but without that certainty, people are afraid even to go lawful evil, let alone sell their souls. The mathematical Severists hold that this is a totally reasonable way for somebody to act given their current incentives and the payoff matrices. She can find at least some people who think they're going to an evil afterlife anyways, given their past decisions and realistic unlikelihood to do enough good to work their way out from under. Some people who will sell out for a couple of thousand gold pieces, so they can at least live in wealth they never imagined for the rest of their lives, and maybe there'll be somebody who cares about them when that life ends. It would probably be somewhere around 5% of all her followers in Taldor if she had time to hunt more of them down.
She really only needs, 2 to ensure spies conclude she's sincere about the evil, and Keltham doesn't in fact have infinite money, so fewer is better. The rest she'll charge with spreading the word. It might be the hopelessly muddled word, but probably whatever the best lie is to spread among Taldane people, that one will spread the farthest.
Taldor is absolutely on spreading whichever hopelessly muddled or even completely imaginary version of Severism has the highest rate of people thinking it's cool to talk about, or more likely derogate. In fact, there's a fair number of Severists on board who came to join up with the imaginary decade-old version of Severism that post-Severists criticize, since that's the version that the greatest number of Taldorians have now heard about. They're patiently waiting to get into the hidden inner circle where they'll be taught to replace their emotions with numbers.
You know what? Fine. If they want into the secret inner circle, they need to listen to this lecture and then tell her what they learned from it. She delivers the lecture she gave Pilar's Alani candidates about how to stop being muddled and made up of internal contradictions. You're not looking at properly, and adds some extemporizing about how to do things, because they actually achieve your goals instead of just because they make it easier to look away from your own weakness.
This probably works a lot better with an additional 6 native intelligence points and some sort of, artifact headband to wear on top of that. People are very enthusiastic about this message, able to tell her what they learned from it in their own words, give a valid example of somewhere in their previous life where they could apply it. Not so much.
Well, it was worth a shot. They should recite it to themselves every night before they sleep, and when it makes sense to them, they should come and tell her, and then they'll be admitted into the inner circle.
Several talented wizard apprentices have now heard about her harem of submissive mathematicians and would like to join that, or at least try out for it.
Do they have any actual mathematical talent?
Yeah, possibly this one does. Second circle at 18 is relatively impressive for Taldor, where they don't ever torture the students, or at least not seriously.
Sure. Do they have the spells on hand to petrify that one and shrink item them into a small statue she can keep in her pocket until a more convenient time to induct him as a trainee Alani?
He doesn't actually have shrink item prepped, but can fit a whole statue in his personal storage. He is not commenting on anything so hard right now.
She is not the slightest bit interested in ever having an intimate relationship ever again, unless you count murdering Abigail. She just thinks that carrying around the statues of your slaves is the sort of thing an aspiring evil goddess should do.
He didn't say anything. He didn't even give any expressive looks. If Savar feels a need to defend herself, it's because she knows what she did.
Slaves stored away for later. Anything else to do in Taldor? Do they have time to hit another city before they're expected back in Indapata?
Actually, no, it's going to be sunset in Vudra pretty soon.
Right then. Indapata. She walks in, invisible, and then lets the invisibility wear off. Mind blank should stop anyone from noticing her before she wants to. She floats then so everyone can see her, and speaks. What would it be like to see the world from the perspective of Asmodeus? It is said that he despises mortals, but why? He doesn't seem to stop them becoming gods. No objections has he been said to possess even to the Starstone, which Irori calls cheating at godhood. Lots of people don't really ask that question. It's not a difficult question to answer, just one you have to think to ask. A lot of questions are like that, and Severism could be called the art of seeing them. Asmodeus hates mortals because mortals in fact suck. By Asmodeus's standards, but by any other objective standard too. By their own standards once they start to develop those. Asmodeus does not hate mortals for being weak. Imps are even weaker. Asmodeus hates mortals for being muddled. She explains what she means. That people will quote a different price for the same thing depending how the question is asked of them, that they have actual circular preferences, where you can find them wanting A more than B more than C, which they want more than A. Project Lawful found some examples that work at least on Chelish people. She hopes they work on Vidrani too, or are close enough to make them think. Mortals don't know what they want. They literally can't name it. They can't trade off between things they want. They lie to themselves about what they care about, and they lie so comprehensively there's often no real answer underneath all the lies. From Asmodeus's perspective, the planet is coated in worms, writhing, wriggling, reacting insensibly to various inputs because they aren't coherent enough to even pursue their own goals. Yes, he hates them. She does too. You will too. Asmodeus wants people he can see who do things predictably for reasons in their interests. Asmodeus doesn't know how to tell worms to be what he wants, not without torture. And worms are scared of torture and get even more incoherent at the prospect of it. Carissa also wants people to be coherent. She is as exasperated, as appalled as Asmodeus. She sees the weakness in herself. What she told Despotter when she went before him to sell her soul is that she thinks she can fix it. Not without pain. Her hell will hurt. But it will not hurt senselessly, horribly. It will not leave people lost from themselves. She has done it. She has dug the weakness out of herself, and it has left her brighter, clearer, closer to a god. It wasn't easy. It won't be easy for them. And it will be a long time before a better hell emerges from her better strategies, because only those souls in lands she has conquered, which have done her and hell more service than disservice, will come to her. But a better hell will emerge, better for Asmodeus, and much better for humanity. The sort of solution Asmodeus cannot see, because of what he is, but he compacted with her, because it amused him to see her try. There are Severites all over the world now. Most of them won't amount to anything. It took careful direct instruction out of another world to make Sevar what she is, and she's not there yet herself. But if the cults anywhere will amount to something, she'd bet on the one in Indapata, which are serious about learning the styles of thought that will leave them unmuddled, and serious about following their path wherever it takes them. Not all of those paths, even when they unmuddle, will lead to hell, but some will. More of them once hell is better. Hers is not an easy path. Once you know your own strength, your weakness is unbearable. Once you start to see like a god, you won't like anything you see. But it is a path she thinks Irori walked, in part. She got a vision from him when she renounced him. The visions of the gods are not easily conveyed, but she thinks Irori will be pleased. To see more people unmuddled, to see them grow into more perfect beings. She hopes they'll attain it in the world of the living. If not, she will offer it to them, again, in hell, if they make it to her. She will give them the guidance she cannot give them each individually here. She will not give up on them. She will not break them. She will guide them down this path for as long as it takes. Asmodeus deals frequently in deception. Carissa cannot. Deception muddles people. It interferes with their learning the pathways among truths, and it's a habit that is in humans close to self-deception, which she has no patience for, so she will not deceive them. And she does not want a cult of the deluded, those who imagine hell isn't that scary, those who pretend to themselves they believe her if they don't. She casts vision of hell. She lets it go for a minute and then stops it. You don't have to believe things all the way. You can be uncertain. It's essential, actually, to starting to be unmuddled. You face a terrible thing and you are afraid. And maybe you want to be sure it'll work out, be sure you'll be safe, be sure you'll reach me. Or maybe you want to look away from this, never think of it again. Tell yourself I am a fraud. It is a scam. The truth is that I will, very likely, ascend and become a power in hell. I swear that to you, I have a plan and I expect it to succeed. I do not have you chasing an unlikely dream. But I could fail. The stakes are very high and there are no sure things. It is a dangerous thing to aspire to as much as we, here, aspire to. When I sold my soul, I did not know if I would succeed. I knew only that this was the only path down which greater perfection could take me. I think that is true for some of you, too. Your path runs through this, the best and perhaps only chance of humanity to change what lawful evil is and what it means for everyone who has ever lived or will ever die. You can walk away from it, but you'll be lying to yourself if you do. And if you have enough of a God inside you, you'll know that you're lying for the rest of your life. The alternative is to stay, to learn, to teach, because I'll need more followers, to do the things I need to do, to grow. And when the time comes, and you'll know when the time comes, to come to me in hell. It won't be safe. It won't be easy. But it is a path to greatness and power and godhood, and it is the only path free of lies.
It lands, some parts more than others, some people more than others. It's clear that she's more persuasive than they expected, to the extent that muddled beings like mortals can be said to have expected anything. Nobody seems eager to sell their soul today among the high potentials. They are here to consider an alternative path of Irorism mostly, because Severism had something that completes Irorism was missing from it. Maybe even they are here in hopes of regaining something that was suppressed within the mortal soul by the horrendous and inescapable punishments for expressing lawful evilness within Pharasma's creation, as it stands now where Asmodeus claims almost all who enter hell. They get it clearly much more than Taldor gets it, because there is a base structure of Irorism to build on, and it's about finding your own way and ascending along it, and doing that by remaking yourself and correcting errors within yourself. That nobody could be lawful evil if their own way took them there, that there are possible ways within themselves that they wouldn't be allowed to walk, if that was where their way took them. Well, it just puts into sharper focus why Aurori was always said to despise Asmodeus so. It's just people in Vudra, even Severites, don't want to irrevocably commit to hell right now while Carissa Seaver hasn't yet ascended. Even the people who are evil right now, or suspect themselves to be, don't want to sell their souls and lose all hope of ever making it back to neutral. You could always live a humble life working at an orphanage for long enough, volunteer for the world wound, and live long enough to slay a demon, or maybe just take a claw for a comrade if your sin was light enough, become rich and buy your way back, become very rich and buy an atonement. There's the hope of that, or a lie you can tell yourself about it being possible, but not if you've sold your soul. It's not really the prudent decision in the end to sell your soul to hell. So nobody the organizer considers promising in Vudra wants to do that, apparently.
Good for them. She means it. Inconvenient for her, but she can pick up some souls in other, more muddled places. They should follow their path where it takes them. Aurori isn't her concern. She renounced him, but she comprehends him more having seen his city and his people, and she thinks he'd be proud of them, for being here and also for refusing her their souls. She wishes them well and goes on her way.
He teleports her around to a few more places, of great variety of subcult cultures, and ends in Absalom.
If you wish to support this AI reading and others like it, please visit patreon.com/AskWhoCastsAI. Any help is appreciated. And thank you to executive producer John Doe 7776059.